Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our lunch session. You've had a full morning of discussion, from India to hyper-aging, to discussions on finding opportunities amid volatility. Well, at lunch today, we focus on Southeast Asia and the Asian market as a whole. We have two government leaders with us this morning, from Indonesia and from the Philippines, to lead off the discussion, followed by a panel of senior executives who know this region and the greater Asia-Pacific area extremely well. Now, we won't be able to bring all this to you without the strong support and encouragement from our sponsors. And give us a minute, because I would like to pay tribute to all of them.
The Milken Institute would like to recognize and thank our strategic partners, Apollo Global Management, Babson Capital Management, Citi, Diamond Resorts International, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Guggenheim Partners, Jefferies, Sanofi, the Sumner M. Redstone Charitable Foundation, USAID. Our Asia Summit sponsors, Apollo Global Management, Babson Capital Management, Citi, Everstone, Fitch Ratings, Guggenheim Partners, J.P. Morgan, Leonard Green and Partners, Orchard Global Asset Management, Providence Equity Partners. Our Asia Summit Corporate Associates, Clearwater Capital Partners, Standard & Poor's Rating Services, UBS AG.
Please join me in thanking them. May I now invite Ambassador Kirk Vega, U.S. Ambassador to Singapore, to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Wing. It's incredibly gratifying to be here. As any of you who spent more than 2 minutes with Mike Milken realizes, that it's no surprise that we have more than double the amount of people here this year as last year in one very short year. So I'm excited to be here today. Before I introduce Mike, who is going to do the actual introduction of the panel, I was asked to say a couple of things about how America looks at this region. And I think it's telling, or at least poignant today, the day after Lee Kuan Yew would have turned 92, that I tell you a little bit about probably the most nerve-wracking experience I've had in this job, which was an hour alone, one-on-one with Lee Kuan Yew a little less than 2 years ago. And it was stressful. I know the president, I know a few other people that are pretty smart, a lot of smart people in this room, but that was the most stressful moment of my life. And he said to me that the one thing that America has to do in this region is to reinforce that we're not going to be going anywhere. And as many parts of that hour-long conversation, I replayed it over and over in my head. Because as I started to go through what a terrible job of communicating America's interests we have out here, I realized how we need to really be telling both our own people and the people in the region that it is not just because we like Asia that America is so deeply invested here. The United States invests more in ASEAN than the next 3 countries combined. In the top 5 markets, it's $220 billion cumulative. That's more than Korea, China, and Japan have invested in ASEAN. We are here because there are 525 million people in the middle class in ASEAN today, and by 2030, that will be 3.2 billion. We're not here because we want to be, although we do. We're here because we have to be. And so as some of you who are deeply embedded in this region know, and some of you who are here learning for the first time, the ability to come to this conference, which is unlike any other that I know of, and hear from people who are putting cash on the barrelhead and making decisions of the difference between the Philippines versus Myanmar versus Indonesia versus Vietnam, is unlike anything else that I know of. And with that, I'm going to turn it to why we're here. You know, the one thing that we say in the embassy that we want to promote to talk about who Americans are, is the four things that I think make us a little different combined than any other country in the world. And that is, when you think of America, you think of innovation, creativity, diversity, and fun. And I don't think there's any American that I've ever met that embodies that more than Mike Milken. Mike is a national treasure. I could go through a list of all of the things that he has done and the lives that he has changed, but I will leave it with this. If we fundamentally believe in America that we are about doing good and doing well, there is no one who is a better poster child for that than Mike Milken. I'm very humbled to be here. I'm very humbled to have been asked to participate in the global conference, and I thank you all for giving me this huge honor of introducing Mike Milken.
So we are honored to be with you today. It's not often, but I've now discovered that I've become chronologically the oldest person on our session here, but maybe I like to think about it as still the youngest from that standpoint. In 1964, I had set on a goal that I wanted to run the U.S. space program and chose to go to the University of California at Berkeley at the time, which was rated #1 in the world as both undergrad and grad. And shortly after I arrived, we had a free speech movement. But when I had a chance to read Paul Luhut's background, who founded the Indonesian Student Action Union when he was in school, and look at his background both in private industry, the military, and today government service. I was thinking back to a period of time since I'm just a few years older of what I was thinking about in 1964 and 1965 as we had first a free speech movement in Berkeley and after followed by an insurrection in Los Angeles that caused me to change my path to finance. And so I think about your life and the development of your country and how important security, education, and opportunity are to the future of Indonesia and how important Indonesia is to the world. The world's 4th largest population, and when we look at long-range projections of economic growth, what we see potentially as the 5th largest economy in the world, with a very important element being government leadership that will take them from where they are to today. In the Philippines, I've had the honor of having many of our employees come from the Philippines, well-educated, particularly in our financial accounting departments, hard workers, and many of them deeply religious, fluent in English, and a country that is young. Both of these countries today are very young as we look not only at Asia, but as we look at the world today and the opportunities. And how well the leadership of these countries does, each in their own unique way, will in many ways affect the world. As the largest Muslim population in the world, and where the population is majority Muslim, what role model will Indonesia play for the rest of the world? As a country that's situated geographically between China and Japan, what role will the Philippines play in the future of the world. And I thought maybe we'd start a little bit with Indonesia, maybe talking a little bit about what are the key elements that you see in your role in Indonesia today that we should look at. Today in the audience, as many of you know, we have many representatives of the Milken Institute Global Capital Markets Group. And this group has about 20 trillion US in assets, and they are not money managers. So yes, Guggenheim and Babson and others are with us here today, but these are sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, family offices, university endowments, corporations that have a lot of liquidity. And part of our effort in looking at the Philippines closely and Indonesia today is to look at it as an opportunity for us to invest our financial capital to help achieve the objectives of these countries and have them take their proper role in the future. So let's turn first to Indonesia first.
First of all, thank you very much, Mike, and with a very generous introduction. But let me add a little bit my background. My background is US military. I graduated from Military Academy, 1970, and I spent like 22 years in the Special Forces, Indonesian Army Special Forces. I was trained in the US, in Fort Bragg, and also I went to the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. So I was parachuting also in Dili when I was in East Timor when I was young. I was first lieutenant, and I lost my soldier also over there. So I experienced a lot of things. So the American also trained me to be Special Forces officers. Then today I'm here. Sometimes I'm asking myself, what's going wrong? You know? I think something wrong with this, because I have to talk about, about economy and politics and other things. But again, it's a great honor to be here today. And the second time I joined the Milken Institute Symposium. I was in Los Angeles 2 years ago. But let me brief you about Indonesia a little bit. Indonesia is a huge country, archipelago country, and our population 250 million is very rich. But what we need today, what our government doing today, basically to transform from the commodity base to the manufacturing base. This is, I think, very important. So we'd like to see more added value to the people of Indonesia. Leadership also in Indonesia is very important. I think the culture of Indonesia, to see the leader as a good example, as a good role model. If the leader gives the good example, they will follow the leader. That's, I think, the basic need right now in Indonesia. When we are talking right now, number of middle class is around 40 million. It's not a small number. This is a very potential for you to invest in Indonesia today. As number two, I think education. Talking about bonus, demographic bonus, I think we are also one of the highest today. And it's also, the same time, going to be big problem in the future if you don't educate this young population in Indonesia. Right now, the government working very hard to fix a lot of things. The first thing that we have done early this year, the subsidy. The subsidy, one of the biggest problem in Indonesia, around $32 billion US dollars. We took it out last December. So now we have much better fiscal room. So we allocated to the infrastructure project right now $22 billion US dollar, which is a thing never happened in the history of Indonesia. So if you look at now Indonesia, we are under construction toll road, for instance, from Jakarta to Surabaya, and from South Sumatra to the North Sumatra, like 2,700 kilometers. This is now moving very well. Although we are facing also a lot of problems. It's like land acquisition, but I think the government very firm. Once we believe this is the interest of the people of Indonesia, we have to move. We have the new rule right now. We are appraised by independent appraisal. When we get the number plus at 30%, and then if we negotiate like 60 days, if we don't agree, we put the money to the court, and then we bulldoze. So make it simple. Maybe because also military involved in this project, yeah. So, because I believe in that, as long as the benefit of the people, not the benefit of the one company or the individual, then we have to do that. Otherwise, Indonesia is gonna stay like this. we like to see the Indonesian future better than today. Our GDP, yes, 1 trillion, nearly $1 trillion US. We like to see more in the future. If we look at also our tax ratio is very low, it's only 11.9%. Look at surrounding Indonesia, some maybe 17, 20%, maybe 18%. We're going to increase also tax ratio, maybe up to around 17, 14% within the 5 years' time. In terms of security, I think we are the largest Muslim population. It's around 230 million. I cannot imagine if maybe 1% of this convert to be hardline or radicalism, to be a terrorist, then you are facing a lot of problem in Indonesia. If you look at now like America, sorry if I may, I discussed it also with Susan Rice last week in the White House. I said to her, you spend like maybe over $2 trillion US in Afghanistan and in Iraq, you got nothing. You lost everything. Sorry to say that. Who is in charge right now in Afghanistan, also in Iraq? While here, we are still very calm. We manage right now situation over there. We monitor all the activities of the hardline, and we establish our good cooperation. So that's why I said to Susan Rice, I think we need also more closer cooperation between Indonesia also to the US or the countries surrounding Indonesia. That's I think in terms of security. So if you ask me right now, what happened to security in Indonesia, of course I cannot guarantee you 100% safe. Like US also, yeah, although it's very, very sterile country, but you still have a lot of problem over there. But I can assure you that we are able and successful so far to monitor any activities of the hardline within the country. Now we are talking about the security. We are talking about the problem in this region, South China Sea. Yes, I think this is one issue, the very hot issue in this particular area. The government of Indonesia has a very clear stand on this. We like to be, to see everybody enjoy the sea line over here, because this is a trade like $5 trillion US. I think every year from Middle East to North to the South. So we like to see the peaceful solution. We like to see the diplomacy as a tools to solve this problem. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, the very hot issue about the haze. I think our friend Singapore also very concerned about that. Slide number 10. We are working very hard on this. I think I was so lucky this morning when I came. I said now the level of the pollution is down to below 60. It was 120. So I said, lucky you invited me to come over here. So you look at the slide number 10, I think we are facing El Nino problem today, but to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, the last 2 weeks we have worked very hard to take it down or to reduce the haze. But the problem over there is not simple. You see, we deploy already 25 aircraft as a helicopter and aircraft combination, but then we found out that the lead land is gambut is a lead land, speed land is the biggest problem, because some of the speed land is like 11 meter thick, So when you already take it down, the fire on the top, but still on the ground. So, but to be honest to you, I have to be fair. We are trying very hard to do so. We deploy like nearly 3,000 army and police to work on this, because we love so much our neighbor here. We don't want to see the Formula One cancel because of the haze from we export haze from Sumatra. But next year, I promise you, it's gonna much better, because yesterday morning like this, I reported to the president, our program next year is much better, number one. Number two, all the people, the ownership, the board, the commissioner, and the beneficiary on the top, we put it in blacklist. So we also invite our friend in Singapore also to consider this one. So we take the very hard policy against this one, because you know what happened? Not because only our friend in Singapore and Malaysia, but also our own people. Over 1 million people right now in Indonesia get a problem with with this problem, is the haze. So we have to clean up all those things. Another thing that we have to be aware, like this, ladies and gentlemen, is slide number 2 about the hardline Indonesia. I mentioned earlier about the terrorist activities in Indonesia. We are facing this one. Look at the slide number on the left. It happened like this now, although in Bahasa, but we are successful to monitor this one. Look at also in Malaysia, this one, the terrorists. This is also another Mindanao in Philippines. We understand this is a problem. We work together with Malaysia, with Singapore, with the Philippines to tackle this one. ASEAN cooperation, I think, is working very well. So we believe this is going to be the strong point of ASEAN. Now we are talking also about the ASEAN Economic Community. Yes, we are preparing. Sometime December is going to be, to impose this one. And also we are ready also to TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is also part of our discussion in Washington. And I believe we can handle this one. We are ready to do so, and it's just a matter of time. Indonesia is very, especially my president. Now, the last one, ladies and gentlemen, the leadership, as I mentioned earlier. So the leadership of President Jokowi, I think, is very good. He's a humble person, simple person, but he dare to listen to your sometimes very hard advice, but he dare also to make a decision. He dare also to take a responsibility, but he's also very clean. So far, I look at behind him, being the intelligence officer when I was active, I look at him very well. I don't want to serve under one leader while they are doing something bad. It's enough. I'm 68 years old, so I'm old enough. So I would like to see the clean leader. So this one gave a good things to the people of Indonesia, that he proved it, that he's a clean leader. What we need today is an example given by the leader. Now President Jokowi gave a good leadership in the country. But I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, if you invest in Indonesia today, I think we are more than ready to welcome you. We prepare a red carpet, and my joke to the president, we invest $500 million, we prepare, you can see my president with red carpet. But next year, have to be $1 billion. Thank you very much.
So we're going to come back to Indonesia, but a very unusual country in a sense that it has fresh water, natural resources, ability to feed its own people. Very few countries in the world have the ability from those three elements: feed your own people, fresh water, and natural resources. And as the world looks at Indonesia, we look forward to being a partner in helping further accelerate and create jobs, which we're going to get into in a moment. So, Caesar, I'm looking at this thing where you call yourself both a grandfather and a father now. Now, you might want to tell us a little bit about how you get to be a grandfather and a father simultaneously. But I enjoy being a grandfather tremendously. Many of you have heard the phrase, it's underrated, it is. But the advantage of being a grandfather is Mike Clouden, Laura, others take responsibility. I don't have to have ultimate responsibility. As a father, you need ultimate responsibility. So what is it like being a grandfather and a father?
Oh, I didn't know that was the topic. I got married late. It took us a long time to have a child, and my wife gave birth to our first child when I was 54. And when we go to play groups, the parents of my child's playmates are the children of my friends. So, in effect, I'm a father and the grandfather of the playmates. So
well, that's good. And we're going to keep you young for a long period of time here. Let's take a look at the Philippines. In many ways, we have a country, if you look at it from a remittance standpoint, that's quite unusual. Let me pull up slide 51, 52 here. Let's start with 56, for example, and just look. Philippines has received a great deal of remittances from the rest of the world as a relatively educated group has spread or service throughout the world today. And so give us a look at the Philippines, and from an investor standpoint, what would you like to see investors do in the Philippines?
Thank you, Mike. Earlier in your remarks, you mentioned the year 1965. That's also when Singapore became independent. In 1965, the Philippines was only next to Japan in terms of economic development. In fact, the exports of the Philippines that year was greater than the combined exports of Korea and Taiwan. That's where we were 50 years ago. And then fast forward to the 70s, 80s, 90s, we became the sick man of Asia. A blessed country with natural resources, talented people, excellent location, becoming the sick man of Asia. And the issue was governance. And in 2010, we were lucky, we elected a leader who ran on a campaign of better governance, who got the mandate, and who walked his talk. And in the 5 years of his government, we've averaged a growth rate of 6%, over 6%. And this is the highest average growth rate we've had in over 40 years. And that just shows you the importance of governance that generates confidence. I think the best example is Singapore. No natural resources and the richest in the region. And clearly, what's happening in the Philippines is just the beginning. Why? You mentioned our young population. Our biggest assets are people. We have 100 million people. All speak English, 99% literacy rate. But more importantly, our people has the ability to work with multinationals because of the long experience of the Philippines under Spain, under the US, under Japan. In fact, the Philippines is probably where the East meets the West because somehow we're Americanized, Hispanic, and yet we're in Asia. And that's the source of strength.
Well, you're well prepared for the United States when the majority of people in the United States, ancestors, come from Latin America.
In
You'll
fact,
be able to speak both English and Spanish for us.
in fact, my name is Purisima when I don't look Spanish at all. But clearly, our asset being our people, and you've demonstrated that. Our remittances is a source of strength. We're now the second leading business process outsourcing country in the world. By next year, our BPO revenues will surpass remittances. And that's the primary reason that the Philippines has been a current account surplus country for the past 13 years. We've also had over 60 straight quarters of growth. Then increasingly, we're having a third strong leg to our current account structure, and that's tourism. As you know, this part of the region is beautiful. The Philippines is right at the center of the Coral Triangle, which is the most beautiful seas around the world, and right at the center of the largest tourist markets in the world. And tourism is slowly gaining traction. We have doubled it since President Aquino came to office, but still pales in comparison to, say, to Thailand. No? But clearly, tourism can become the third strong leg of that current account story. Fourth, natural resources. We're the fifth most mineralized country in the world. No? That was our strength 50 years ago. We're revisiting it to make sure that it is done in a responsible manner. That can become the fourth strong leg of the Philippine story. And that is why when the IMF and other institutions look at vulnerability to, say, the challenges that our neighbor China is facing, they rank the Philippines as the least vulnerable in the region and among the least vulnerable in the whole world. But we look at this as an upside because exports is relatively just at the starting point in the country. Although we've made significant inroads already. For example, if I tell you who the fourth largest shipbuilding country in the world is, you probably won't guess it's the Philippines. But we are. We, because of our natural resources, basically our people. We are also the 10th largest semiconductor producer in the world. So we're starting to gain traction in manufacturing as well. That is why I think it is really a good time to visit the Philippines because when we somehow gained back our senses, we gained it back at the right time. Why? We're about to become one integrated ASEAN. And obviously, Indonesia is large on its own. But the 9 other countries of ASEAN are small individually. Our future is really tied together with ASEAN. Because ASEAN, if you look at the geography of Asia, Mike, it really is the natural hub of Asia trade. Because China, no matter how big it is It's bordered by Russia, by the deserts, by the Himalayas. And its trade will have to go through ASEAN. And the rest of the other countries in the north have historical issues. And therefore, the positioning of ASEAN is quite, I think, offers a lot of potential because by investing in connectivity, by making sure that we have free trade agreements across the globe, we will be able to achieve that vision of being the hub of Asia trade. In fact, interestingly, in 2013 and 2014, the total FDIs of ASEAN was greater than China. And I think people are starting to realize the potential of an integrated ASEAN. Will be 600 million people, definitely the third largest aggregate population of the world, one of the youngest, and with per capita that's going to increase dramatically. It's been said that 2/3 of the world's middle class will be in Asia. A big portion of that will be in ASEAN. And that's why we're pleased that the Milken Institute is here in Singapore and we're talking about our region. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, let's step back for a moment. And one of the things, a study we had done almost 3 decades ago was the concept of democracy and whether democracy was an independent variable or a dependent variable. And our studies showed that democracy was actually a dependent variable. And it was dependent on a strong and large middle class. And we can look at a number of attempts around the world in the last decades where democracies have been attempted without a middle class unsuccessfully in many cases. And so the first determinant that drives us here is this growth of a middle class where 2/3 of the people in the middle class, and we're going to have some countries, they'll have more people in the middle class than the entire population of the United States. The second is the youth. And let's take a look, if we could, say at slides 19 or 20. Just take a look at the world's population here and what is occurring around the world in terms of growth rates, etc. And so we've had these various growth rates, if you look at them over time, of the world where Europe started Asian, and we're looking today at the potential peaking out of Asia, particularly with China's population eventually falling and the growth in sub-Saharan Africa. But if we step back and just look at the Philippines and Indonesia in terms of median age, they are among the youngest countries in the world. And so the Philippines being the youngest in the group and Indonesia being young, and both of them younger than the average age in this region of the world. And the question here is, can we create the jobs for your people? We've heard that the first tenet is middle class, the second, leadership, government leadership. And all investors, everyone knows around the world that leadership is required. When we think of the difference of individuals, whether it was Steve Jobs today that a new movie is coming out, or others that have changed the course of history, or whether it was the leadership of Sony during its first 20 or 30 years, and what happened after he passed away. And so the leadership is important. But let's focus now on another thing that's going to require to create stability is jobs for young people. And as you step back, one of the benefits we heard on the panel discussion, on our discussion a minute ago about Indonesia, is one of the great byproducts of the rise of the middle class is a focus on the quality of life and the environment. So we heard a discussion of the environment here as it relates to Indonesia being a great neighbor and just how effective they are in quickly dropping the pollution rate in start of the Milken Institute conference this year. But let's talk about the challenge of youth.
Yeah.
And from a security standpoint, if we have people that don't have jobs, don't have purposes in life, it's going to create a lot of challenge in security.
Well, thank you, Mike. I think the government program to transform from the community base to the manufacturing base, I think this is the very important decision, because immediately could create more job opportunity to the people of Indonesia. But on top of that, I think the very important is education. If you look at education right now, in Java, Sumatra, we consider it's quite good. But then outside of Java, like in Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Papua, still much lower than in Java and Sumatra. So the program of government right now, we allocated like 20% of our national budget for the education. Now we focus on especially technology outside of Java, because today is an era of IT, era of gadget. Everywhere in Indonesia right now, if you look at number of people of Indonesia using the cellular phone is much higher than some.
I've even noticed Brad Belt was using his during this panel discussion here, Brad.
So this is, I think, the new era. We have to create a job opportunity in Indonesia by, doing like the manufacturing era today. Manufacturing policy is very important for Indonesia to see added value, to create job opportunity, to get some more taxes for the government, for the people of Indonesia.
Let's take a poll. How many people in the audience have been to Indonesia?
Quite many.
And how many
thank
people
you.
in the audience have been to the Philippines? Okay, so they're not strangers.
So I think right now is the difference, if I may say so, the difference between the government right now and the previous government and some years ago, I think right now more transparent, much transparent. That's number one. Number two, the last year election to presidential election, it was a very good history for Indonesia. A lot of foreigners, or even the local people said that gonna be a big fight between the elected president and the one who lost the race. But at the end, we saved the problem. Now, cooperation between the parliament and the government is very good. Why? We understand very much together that we have to work together to bring prosperity to the people of Indonesia. We cannot just fight. They can criticize the government, but in the good manner. It's not always to destroy what we have done. So this is, I think, to prove it to the foreign people that democracy in Indonesia is very mature. Then we can also, because of that, we are doing a lot of things right now to fix like legal issue, like law. We're going to harmonize, now already ongoing, harmonize a lot of regulation in Indonesia to make it easier for investor to invest in Indonesia. This is, I think, the program of the government of Indonesia right now. President yesterday, the cabinet meeting mentioned again and again, I want to see within the couple months ahead that all the regulation have to be make it simple and easier for the investor to invest in Indonesia. If you have any problem, ladies and gentlemen, to invest in Indonesia, please do come. Let me know. I have my email over there. Let's work together. We fix it. I promise you. If I cannot deliver something to you, I better step down for my job. You see, because we really want to see something happen. We don't want to see that foreigner had a problem to invest in Indonesia. But of course, you have to also look at the interest of the people of Indonesia.
Okay, so there's a challenge to each of you, whether it's rule of law, terms for creditors. We have this email, we'll post it on the Milken website for you.
With Mike,
So let's turn to the Philippines. You have an election coming up. And I know in the past that you had been in the government with a group had resigned because you were not comfortable with the credibility of the government. You've come back and you've told us today of an awakening, really, and a miracle that has occurred in the Philippines, an opportunity. What are the issues of the Philippines people that they're focused on in this election, and what should we look at as it relates to the up-and-coming election?
Before I answer that, Mike, let me just talk about what we're doing regarding education. The President of the Philippines believes that education is the greatest equalizer. And that's why the largest item in our budget is education. We have the primary and secondary education free as mandated by our Constitution. We've basically addressed the short classroom and the books and teacher shortage. And we're not only increasing investment, we're aligning our educational system with the rest of the world. We've introduced K+12. And we also are looking at tech-book education. We've increased massive amounts of investment there. We're looking at the German model of apprenticeship, and we're working closely with industry. to make sure that what we produce is what industry needs, because that's the best way to make sure that the people we produce are useful and they get productive lives. The second thing we're doing is we're investing in infrastructure. Just like Indonesia, the Philippines is an archipelago. We believe in connectivity with the rest of the world, but also as importantly within the Philippines. Physical connectivity, harmonizing policy is also equally important. And predictability of policy is, I think, another key ingredient that will really engender confidence. The issues in the election this year is really about continuing better governance, continuing the Philippines in the current path that it's in. And fortunately for us, the awakening of the Philippines has happened when you have mobile phone, when you have internet connection. So the people are empowered. People know what's happening. And in the age of AMLA, social media, it's going to be very hard or harder to hide monies that you steal. So clearly, compared to 2010, this election is an election where you have a more empowered Filipino voter. So what I'm looking for really is simple. One, credibility of the process, and two, a winner with a mandate. Because you need someone who has the political capital to continue the reforms. Because the work's not yet done. It took us over 40 years to get to where we were. It will take us another maybe 30 or so years to get back to where we want to be. And I think fortunately for us, it's happening at the right time. In my own case, no, I had a short stint with the previous administration, and you mentioned that we asked her to resign. Then we had this, I'm one of those who had the chance to have the discussion with the minister mentor. But instead of one-on-one, there were about 20 of us Filipinos. And at the end of the 2+ hour session at the Istana, he was quite exasperated with us, and he said, I don't understand you Filipinos. No? You keep complaining about your government. The best way to change government is to join it. You have to change it from within. Because changing it from the outside is a revolution. And that's what prompted me to join for a second time. But I think 2 times is enough. I need to go back to your space.
Well, one, I think we've had a good introduction. I think you can feel much more comfortable about leadership and responsiveness here. And you mentioned something that we're going to have to prepare for where there's demand. We have to trade people for the jobs of the future. So I thought I might just end on a short story, one of my favorite stories told to me when I was in Russia many years ago. And there are 2 men going down the street. And the first one is digging a hole. And then about 5 minutes later, the person comes by and fills in the hole. And then the person digs a hole and the other person fills it up. And the person says, I couldn't wait any longer. I have to ask, what are you doing here? And they said that they're a part of a 3-man team. And the person that plants the trees is not here today. So the issue is that they were going to do their job regardless of whether there was demand, etc. And if we pull up slide 21 in closing, one of the reasons we wanted to stress today Indonesia and the Philippines is obviously in this part of the world the 2 largest populations. But also this is where the world economy is going, and the success of Indonesia and the Philippines is very important to the entire world. So I want to thank you both for joining us and for serving in government.
Thank you.
Today. And now I'm going to turn it over today to Kevin Sneeder, who's going to run the next panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
sit next to Kevin. I'll take this one. Okay.
Okay, great. Just keep this on my.
Jingo.
Great session.
Yeah, keep it for me. Thank
It's
you.
always interesting, isn't it?
You sit in.
Good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. If I can just have your attention for the second conversation over lunch. And I'm hoping we can pick up on some of the themes you've just heard, perhaps from the angle of business leaders here in the region. And I'm therefore delighted to be able to introduce a panel that consists of a number of executives who've really been wrestling with some of the opportunities and the challenges in Indonesia and the Philippines and beyond that we just heard discussed. My name is Kevin Sneeder. I'm the chairman of McKinsey in Asia, and I'm privileged to be joined today by, on my right, Jing Ulrich, on your left, who is the managing director and vice chairman of JP Morgan Chase. Jing works with all lines of business within JP Morgan Chase, which means she has a terrific vantage point to look across the region geographically and also in terms of different industries, and share with us some of the perspectives that have led her to be ranked 3 times among Fortune magazine's 50 most powerful global businesswomen. So thank you for joining us today, Jing. I'm also delighted to be joined by Tim Kofer. Tim is the Executive Vice President and President of Asia Pacific and Eastern Europe for Mondelez International. Tim joined Kraft Foods, the predecessor organization to Mondelez International, in 1992. He has more than 20 years of experience, importantly here in the region, but also prior to this, he led Kraft's $13 billion European business and was the executive who led the integration efforts when Kraft acquired Cadbury. So he's the man who brought Oreos to many of you and therefore can speak with authority on a product we all know and love, but I shouldn't forget chewing gum as well. I'm also pleased to be joined by Achal Agarwal, who is to my right, looking at the stage to my left, Asia Pacific Region President for Kimberly-Clark. We all know what Kimberly-Clark brings to every bathroom in the world, so that's not Oreos, but anyway, I'm moving swiftly on. 30 years of experience in managing large, complex, and fast-growing organizations here in Asia. He has seen the ups, he's seen the downs, he's seen all the points in between, and will be able to join up and share with us a perspective, not just from having been at Kimberly-Clark, but also prior to that at PepsiCo, where he was the Chief Operating Officer for Pepsi's beverage business in Greater China. I'm also joined by Sam Fisher. He is the President of Greater China and Asia for Diageo. My accent is Scottish, his product is Scottish, so it's a particular pleasure to introduce the man behind the world's whiskey. He's a member of Diageo's Executive Committee, and his responsibilities span all of Diageo's businesses across the region. I should also point out that Sam is a board member of Singapore 50's Champions of Change, which is an organization committed to improving diversity and in particular women ranks in the business landscape of this country and beyond. And last but by no means least, all the way to the far end there is Chris Way. Chris is chairman of Aviva Asia and global chairman of Aviva Digital, the British insurer. He recently launched Aviva's Digital Garage, something I suspect we'll hear about, based here in Singapore, to develop and test new insurance ideas and services for financial services in the digital age. He's held senior leadership roles in marketing and risk across an array of companies here, including Great Eastern, AIG, ING Canada, and I'm told there are more. So that's our panel for today. And I think what we'll try and do is we'll have this as a free-flowing conversation. There will be a moment or two at the end for some questions from the floor, so if you have them, please save them and they'll certainly be called upon. But I'd really just like to ask the panelists a fairly open question. There's plenty of turmoil, disruption, volatility in this region, as there is in the rest of the world. Is it the case that the world should still see Asia as the global engine for growth? Jing.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and the colleagues on the panel. And Mike, thank you very much for inviting us here. Great conference. Now, Kevin, we've had several months of market turmoil and currency turmoil. Here in Asia, a lot of the markets have taken their cue from China's market collapse, basically starting in June. If you look around the Asia-Pacific region, the economic growth rates of all major economies are actually decelerating, except for India. India this year in 2015 will be growing 7.8%, actually faster than China's growth rate. But looking at previously fast-growing economies such as Korea and Taiwan, Taiwan is only growing 1.3%, Korea 2.6%, Singapore only 1.9%. China, of course, is the largest economy in the region. Its growth rate has also slowed to its lowest level since 1990. So it's not a very robust picture if you just look at economic growth. We also have had challenges facing exports. This region, especially in Southeast Asia, has been one of the major export engines in the world. But we have had an export recession, partly because of the slowdown in demand from Europe and the US, but importantly also from the slowdown in China. So Chinese demand has come down, basically slowing Asian exports from Indonesian coal to Malaysian electronics to Thai auto parts. So on top of that, we have had a lot of currency turmoil. This morning, you have seen perhaps the Indonesian rupiah falling to fresh 17-year lows, basically the lowest level since the Asian financial crisis in 97-98. The Malaysian ringgit as well is at a fresh 17-year low. So you have a lot of currency headwinds as well. So if you look at the Asian region, in other areas, we've had a collapse in commodity prices. Some of the economies here are actually driven by demand for natural resources, including the likes of Indonesia and Malaysia. So with the collapse in commodity prices, oil, minerals, etc., that has really dented domestic demand. So so far, it sounds like a pretty gloomy picture, but
yes.
Actually, I am not.
Cheer us up, come on.
I am not that negative.
Is that possible?
Well, yes, I'm going to do that
Okay,
right
here
now.
we go.
I'll do my best.
Good.
Well, Asia is 57% of the global population. There are still some long-term positive trends in place. For example, urbanization. In China in particular, that's 1.3% of the global population. Urbanization rates are going up by 1 percentage point per year. So 52% now, going to 53 next year, 54 the year after. And this will not stop until it perhaps reaches 85%. So for the next 30 years and 35 years, we can continue to expect the Chinese population and Asian population to continue to urbanize. Once they leave the farmland, once they move to an urban lifestyle, income levels basically grow by some 4 times. So there's still tremendous creation of wealth, affluence, and importantly, aspiration among the Asian consumer. Now, of course, lots of interesting trends are transforming the Asian consumer economy. A lot of the colleagues on this panel are focused on the consumer sector. The Asian consumer only now accounts for about 26% of global consumption, just because the US is so dominant in global consumption. 70% of the 17 trillion US economy comes from personal consumption. But this number is going to grow. In the next 5 years, that number will be 1/3. So the Asian economies will account for 1/3 of global private consumption. Retail sales growth in this region, 4.6%, is still higher than other regions. Now, we also, remember, live in an increasingly sharing economy. I think the digitalization of various businesses is really transforming the consumer landscape. And if you look at the Asian region, we're going to have over 100 phones per 100 person by next year. Basically, 117 phones per 100 people. So some people have 2 phones.
They're in this room, actually, the people with the 2 phones.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah,
so e-commerce is transforming, or mobile commerce is transforming the Asian consumer landscape. In China, of course, that's the largest consumer market here in Asia. It's very interesting to note that 10% of overall retail sales now come from e-commerce. This is coming from nowhere just a few years ago. Alibaba, of course, is a dominant market player there with 80% market share. Overall, in Asia, retail sales basically will reach $10 trillion in the coming year. 10 trillion. So that's a large amount of money. So despite the near-term challenges, I described currency challenges. A lot of the colleagues here on this panel work for US companies. They have to report in US dollars. Analysts are looking at EPS growth in US dollars. So when you translate back the earnings that you get from this region, you clearly will fall short due to the currency depreciation. However, we still have trends of urbanization, increasing wealth, and travel tourism is becoming very big as well. Despite the slower growth, this region will still deliver the fastest growth in any region, 5.9%. So I would say near-term challenges, some potholes, a speed bump or two, but longer term, we cannot lose faith in the Chinese and Asian consumer.
Thank you very much indeed. So you are a yes, this remains the engine of global growth for the long term. Thank you for that, Jing. Tim, where are you in this debate?
Thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd be in a pretty similar spot to my colleague here. Here at Mondelez International, we would say that the near-term challenges in Asia are real, starting certainly with the Forex depreciation for many of the currencies here versus the US dollar and versus other currencies where we buy commodities like the British pound. That has, without question, presented a material headwind to our profitability. And I would say that in general, the economic slowdown we've seen over the last year or so across Asia does show up in many of the categories in which we compete and in the snacking categories. So the near-term challenge is real and we're feeling it. I think for us, what's most important and for any good business is to control what you can control. We can't control the Forex rate of many of these currencies, nor the weather and the speculators of commodities. But what we can control is our business model. What we can control is our cost structure to weather some of these storms, navigate these choppy waters so that you come out on the other side an even stronger company and one that can invest in what undoubtedly is a very bright future in this region. In our company, we've taken quite a number of measures to tighten the belt in our supply chain in terms of reinventing the supply chain, closing or streamlining facilities, but simultaneously reinvesting in state-of-the-art, more efficient plants around this region, as well as controlling overhead costs. I think one of the things I've noticed, having run big businesses in the Americas, in Europe, and now in Asia Pacific, there is an opportunity, at least at the margin in this region, for a little bit more discipline and cost control in the overhead and non-people related cost arenas. And that's something we've attacked vigorously to strengthen our business model here and really spend our money where it counts. So similar to you, I would say near-term challenges are real. Mid to long term, I am unequivocally bullish on Asia. And you'd expect someone like us to say that. I think importantly, we're putting our money where our mouth is in this region. And just in the last 18 months, despite some of the volatility we've all experienced, we've put over $1 billion of fresh investment in this region. State-of-the-art new chocolate factory in India at almost $200 million. A new facility in China making our delicious Oreo cookies in China. and as well, you may have seen in July we completed one of the largest acquisitions on the Vietnamese stock exchange history, and that is the acquisition of Kindo Foods, the leading snacking company in Vietnam, which offers a tremendous platform for us to grow in Vietnam, but also the broader ASEAN community. So we're bullish on Asia, and as I said, we're investing for that future. I think, as we go on perhaps in this panel, we also see a number of consumer trends in this region that for the smart companies that can mine those and capitalize on those, the growth of the middle class, the growth of well-being as a key selector of choice of products and brands, and the longer working hours in Asia and the longer commutes, that is having a profound impact on how people shop, when they shop, where they shop. And again, for those companies that can understand that, I think it represents new growth opportunities. And that's why mid to long term, we're bullish on Asia.
We're going to pick up on some of those trends shortly. Acho, 30 years watching, participating, leading and managing companies here in Asia. Does it feel different this time around as you look at some of the gyrations in the marketplace?
No, absolutely. I'll just build on what Jing and Tim talked about, because there's no question about the short-term challenge, particularly currency for US companies, because we report in US dollars, and that's a headwind which is really strong. Having said that, I'm bullish on Asia. We can't get away from the macros of the population and the demographics, and that's going to drive Asia. The 2/3 of the middle class, which was talked about, is a real thing, which is happening. But again, if we go back, what makes me really bullish is about the consumer. And let me talk about a couple of trends that we see, which are driving, which in my mind will drive the growth of Asia in future. First of all, consumers are becoming more and more demanding. Asian consumers want the best, and they want relevant products. So we produce a great brand of diapers called Huggies. The best diapers in the world are in North Asia, in markets like Korea, markets like China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. They have the best diapers in the world. The best diaper sold in China is sold at a price which is unaffordable in the US. So we actually have an innovation center in Korea. We have an innovation center in China, and that is driving innovation for Kimberly-Clark right across the world. And so it's a case of reverse innovation taking place, because Asia is where all the innovation is taking place. A second trend, which I think is everyone's talked about, is the connectivity online. All our consumers are online. Mothers have no time, and therefore they are online, they don't go out. They expect to be engaged online, they expect to do stuff online, which therefore drives our communication, which is digital, and also in terms of e-commerce. So Jing talked about 10% being in China. The fact in Korea is that 90% of diapers today in Korea are sold online. 30% of our diapers in China are sold online. 3 years back, this was virtually zero. And Asia is driving both digitization and e-commerce across the world. Asia Pacific for Kimberly-Clark accounts for 56% of e-commerce sales, and that includes the US. 85% of international sales are in Asia Pacific on e-commerce. So it's clearly the driver of the growth. Now, in order to manage these trends, the biggest thing which I see happening is talent. And if you think about what Asia Pacific can contribute in terms of talent, in terms of the growth rates, in terms of the diversity that has to be managed, there's a huge amount of talent in Asia which can contribute not only to Asia Pacific, but also to developed markets like the United States. And we are exporting a lot of talent because the Asian talent is making a difference in the United States in terms of how people think about things. And we crystallized it in Asia Pacific to 3 Gs, gender, generations, and geographies. So gender is obvious. Our consumers are largely women. We want our workforce to represent our consumers. We need women. In terms of generations, the millennial employee has become critical. It used to be something which was a buzzword. It's now critical. In China, in order to, across the space, we are digital dinosaurs all sitting out here. At least I can speak for myself. But just recently we had a board meeting in China. 3 25-year-olds presented the digital strategy of Kimberly-Clark to the board. That is what is happening today in the world. And geographies we talk about in terms of we can't anymore think about national boundaries. If we hire a general manager, we do not hire a general manager for Singapore or for Philippines or Indonesia. We hire a general manager for ASEAN so that they can move across countries and best practices can be shared by people actually moving across. So I'll leave those thoughts and we can build on that further.
We will certainly come back to talent. I suspect we'll come back to the best diaper in the world too, but we'll hold that thought for a moment or two. Sam, the same question for you. As you look at Asia, is this the engine for growth from a Diageo perspective?
Certainly. Firstly, thank you, Kevin, for having me, Mike and the Millikan Institute. It's terrific to be here. I'll try not to cover some of the earlier panelists' subjects because I think most of them are completely relevant for our business as well. But I'll start with Diageo because some people here may not know who Diageo is. It's a name that represents our purpose, and our purpose is all about celebrating life every day, everywhere. Diageo is the largest spirits company in the world and the largest spirits company in Asia. And when I say spirits, I mean international spirits. So what a wonderful reason to get up in the morning.
I think like the minister, I've got a thought. The minister asked if everyone had been to Indonesia. Maybe we should ask if anyone's had a Johnny Walker.
Well, I'll get to that because
Okay,
I did notice the offer from the minister, and I certainly intend to take that up. But look, in relation to longer term in Asia, I, like everyone else, see the opportunity, whether it's GDP, whether it's urbanisation, the emerging middle class. For us high net worth individuals, there's a huge population of high net worth individuals residing here who really love luxury. So the ability for us to market luxury products longer term is enormous. And we think about our categories and our consumers as those who are in legal drinking age. And every year we see, just under 60 million legal drinking age consumers come into the categories. So enormous opportunity, short-term volatility, I think it's been covered. We understand all of that. Critical for us is really building that volatility into our plans, because we shouldn't be surprised by emerging market volatility. Every year we understand something's going to happen somewhere in a country. And I think we need to be really strong at understanding how we build plans around that so that our investors, are not surprised. I think we need to take a medium to longer term view. It's easy in this time, and I think Tim mentioned it, to pull back investment to manage your P&L and to maintain an earnings view. But pulling back investment now is extremely detrimental to those long-term plans that we're so committed to. So we need our investors, our management, to understand a medium to longer term view, because that's what it's going to take for us to unlock the opportunity in this part of the world. I think, and this is where the minister comes in, for us, we're in a regulated, sensitive industry. It's important that we've got a dialogue with government, that we understand your agenda. If there are issues in countries, we want to help be a part of the solution, not the problem. It's critical for us as we look for a smooth path forward, that we've got the opportunity to work with governments so that we've got a regulatory and policy environment that will enable our growth. And then finally, we all talk about volatility, in economic terms or political terms. But actually, at the moment, our consumers are more volatile than they've ever been. They are switching, faster than we've ever seen in traditional marketing. We're having to market in a digital world. It's no longer digital marketing. We need to understand the environment that we're in. We need to be tailoring programs to consumers. We need to understand that popularity and large scale is no longer attractive to consumers. They want a relationship with our brand. They want to understand how our brands can enhance their experience. The only way we can do that is with deep insights. We need to know our consumer better than we've ever known them before. We need to be able to take those insights and be able to turn them into meaningful opportunities in markets quickly, because local competition will beat us if we don't. They're faster, they haven't got head offices for decision making, and they haven't got the bureaucracy perhaps that we have. So we need to adapt our models, particularly in innovation. We need to be able to take those insights, develop products quickly so that we can tap into that opportunity. So for us, the challenge is more about the consumer, more understanding those consumers in more detail than we ever have before, and being able to respond to them.
Thanks, Emma. That certainly tees up a number of conversations we're going to have around the volatile consumer. Chris, you're living that life, Digital Asia.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Mike and the Milken Institute for inviting me as well. Basically everything that Sam said. So if you recorded his words, just play it back. But in a nutshell, maybe a little bit of background on Aviva. Aviva is the largest UK insurance company. I need to caveat that because we have Mr. Don Kinnock in the room, not by market cap, but we are the largest insurer in the UK. We have about 1 in 4 pensions of the UK population, 17 million customers. So we are sizable. But 3 years ago, our balance sheet was in a mess. And I'm somewhat inspired by the openness of the previous panel, so I'll share some of the same sort of tone. We just recently completed an acquisition in April of this year that allowed us to accelerate the repair of our balance sheet. And we're finally in a position to grow and invest. Before that, we sold great performing assets at a discount to fund a dividend we couldn't afford. So after a long, long period of history in Asia and inconsistent investment, we don't have a heck of a lot to show for it. Now, we have a great business in Singapore. We're number one in group employee benefits. We have a great distribution network with independent financial advisors. But one of our primary distribution partners, which is DBS Bank, is coming to an end after 15 years. So we haven't played the game particularly well, is my point. And what I do want to pick up on is sort of what Sam said. And a lot of our investors ask me and ask my boss, is Aviva too late to Asia? And the answer is no. And the reason why is because there are massive macroeconomic trends and demographic trends that are working its way through this region that has not been addressed. And it's very, very different. Asia is just a geographic accumulation of geographies and countries. Every country is extremely different in terms of its demographics, culture, preferences, attitudes, and you cannot take a broad brush towards Asia. Indonesia is very different, for example, to China. China is actually one of the most rapidly aging populations, right? But there are some really interesting common themes that thread the region. So for example, and this is one of my favorites, it's the imposed or natural one-child policy. In China, it's imposed. In Hong Kong and Singapore and Turkey, it's natural. For whatever reason. People actually don't want to have a second child for stress, for work pressures, or they can't feel that they can afford a second private education. But that is the behavior. And what ends up happening is you have very similar trends, ironically, in the UK, in China, in Singapore, in Hong Kong. Right now, it's roughly 6 working adults to 1 retiree. By 2030, modeled to be about 2 to 1. So has anybody figured out how to solve that? I guarantee you no. Is Singapore one of the most progressive countries in trying to deal with that issue? Yes. On the other hand, you've got young populations like Indonesia and Philippines, okay, which present a fundamentally different opportunity, right? So as an organization operating in the region, it's absolutely impossible to take sort of a one approach to it. Now, just addressing the question of are we too late to the region, in addition to those massive trends, what we are somewhat betting on is the fundamental changing behavior of customers using digital. And there's a lot of disruption going on, and we've chosen to do it a certain way, so Kevin sort of lobbed me a ball to set me up. But what Aviva has done, I'm not saying this is the right approach. We don't actually know yet whether it's the right approach, but we have separated digital fundamentally from our traditional businesses. And what our leadership has basically agreed to is that we won't be averse to internal competition across our different business units. That is a very gutsy move, if I may say so myself, somewhat arrogantly. But if we don't do that, I don't think we'll move forward in terms of progressing on a whole new agenda, because legacy and history and protecting existing silos of businesses will not just simply allow that to happen. And my final point, just picking up the point on talent, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I am the only Asian, although Hong Kong-born Canadian, on the management board. This is the top 7 executives within Aviva. And all it means is I fly a lot. I've got a lot of air miles, okay? But I'm one of the 7 people at the table representing Asia. So we have to grow in our emerging markets. And Asia is not really an emerging market anymore, but for us it is, right? And in 2 years, it went from 6% of our new value creation to 14%, roughly. I note that this is recorded, so rough numbers. But the point is, it's gone up a lot if you do things right, and it's got to be more, because the UK, where we have about 2/3 of our market cap value in terms of representation, is not generally viewed to be a growth market, even though it is a great market. So why does Prudential UK have a bigger multiple? Because they have a bigger representation in the growth market. Now, I'm not saying we want to be a Prudential. What I'm saying is Aviva's trying to figure out how it will add value to the markets in which it operates, add value to its various stakeholders, including its shareholders, and also the countries in which it operates.
Thanks, Chris. Well, let's pick up on some of those issues, and we'll do it more as a conversation now. The consumer. Let's start there. I mean, Jing, you teed up, and Mike, you pointed out in the last session, 550 million going to 1.2 billion middle-class people by 2030. The numbers are enormous. How should we be thinking about the Asian consumer? And Chris, you even challenged us, is there such a thing as the Asian consumer, given the enormous diversity of this region? love to get some reactions from the panels that are dealing with this issue. Jing, perhaps you can give us some of the numbers, and Tim, some of the issues.
Sure. You know, Kevin, you cannot define sort of the characteristics of the Asian consumer. There's no such thing as the Asian consumer because everyone is so different from country to country, from city to city. But there are some common similarities and themes. For example, I think consumers everywhere, including Asian consumers, are becoming much more demanding, much more savvy. They're much more connected than ever before. And this poses opportunities and challenges for the companies sitting here and for us here at JP Morgan. You know, it's very interesting. For example, we talked about currency movements. And this year in particular, currency movements have been wild. You know, you've got the Chinese currency coming down in August by only 2%. But since then, all the Asian currencies have actually depreciated against the US dollar with the exception of the Hong Kong dollar. The Japanese yen has come down so much in the last year. So for businesses, you know, consumers basically are looking online, especially when they're purchasing luxury goods. They say, well, I can buy a Tiffany necklace, you know, in Hong Kong much more cheaply than in China. Or I'll fly to Europe to buy, you know, a Prada handbag rather than buying it in mainland China where taxes are very high. You know, people say I can buy a Rolex watch in Hong Kong much more cheaply. Therefore, because I checked the information online, I can get myself to Hong Kong from Beijing on a first-class ticket, stay in the peninsula, enjoy high tea, and come back still ahead. You know, this is how it is. So businesses need to adjust their pricing. Maybe this applies less to diapers and Oreo cookies because these are.
Let's find out.
Yeah, but you know, for luxury goods, this is a major issue. So these days, we're seeing the consumer traveling so much more. You know, just give you one number, which is quite interesting. The Chinese consumer is the largest group of people traveling overseas these days, right? This year, we project 120 million Chinese people will travel overseas. A lot of them travel overseas specifically to shop. How does this number stack up against the Japanese travelers? We all remember back in the 1980s, Louis Vuitton and other luxury brands set up shops in, you know, Hawaii, San Francisco, because that's where the Japanese people went. At the peak, 16 million Japanese people traveled overseas. In 2 years' time, there will be 10 times that many Chinese people traveling overseas, 160 million. It makes perfect sense because the Chinese population is exactly 10 times that of the Japanese population. So as these consumers travel overseas, they may not bring home, you know, a set of diapers, but they may bring back home, you know, luxury handbags. But increasingly, you know, you have Chinese people traveling to Hong Kong, literally to buy shampoo because they trust the quality. They bring back home 2 tins of milk powder because they trust that the milk powder sold in Hong Kong is safer than that in mainland China. So I don't know about Diageo in your case, whether they're shopping more in duty-free shops around the world at airports, or whether they're shopping at home, especially in the case of mainland China, where there are 3 layers of taxes, you know, VAT, luxury goods tax, import tax, et cetera, right? So then in a nutshell, the consumer in Asia and across the world is much more savvy, much more connected, and also they're armed with tons of information that they never had before. So as businesses, you need to tackle this challenge. How do you serve this well-educated, increasingly savvy consumer better?
Well, let's talk about that because you paint a picture partly at the high end, but also in the middle market. And I do want to pick up on this because we have got some people who represent both ends of the spectrum. Diageo clearly have products at the upper end, but we also have the Oreo end of the market.
Sure.
How are you seeing this consumer change in Asia?
Yeah, absolutely. As has been often stated in this panel and the previous ones today, the growth of the middle class in Asia is a huge tailwind for all of our companies. 2/3 of the world middle class by 2030. When we see the market, the snacking market broadly, we see real growth pockets at both ends. And I think we've heard at the high end a huge opportunity there. I mean, you take a country like India. In India, we've got a business approaching $1 billion with the iconic Cadbury brand as one of the core brands. The growth that we're seeing in India is at both ends of that spectrum. So we have an entry offering of Cadbury dairy milk at just 2 rupee, all the way up till 700 rupee at the higher end, say for a gifting product. I think the combination of continued penetration outside of the major urban areas with that lower end aspirant population. We're seeing the huge shift in India, certainly in Africa as well, from truly strugglers, just coming out of poverty, into what we'd call the aspirant class. It's about 20% of the population in those geographies. Those consumers, a little different than the high end you had mentioned, but they have an affinity for brands. They want high quality. They're receiving the messages of the brands many times through mobile, digital. And so the opportunity to introduce them to your brands, to in this case, the delicious taste of a Cadbury or an Oreo at 2 or 3 rupee. We've all got to do our little commercial plugs here, right? As long as by
I'll
others.
endorse that one.
So I won't resist that opportunity either. Thank you. But and so huge pockets of opportunity down at that end as well on the high end. And I think again, the companies that can play both ends stand the chance to benefit the most.
But you made the point, both of you made the point, the customer is very discerning, and you talk about the best diaper in the world being up here in North Asia.
Let me just take up where Tim left off. So Tim talked within a country about 2 kind of consumers, but let me talk about how this is driving innovation for us across Asia Pacific. So we take a Chinese consumers, and we all know about the one-child policy and the focus on the child, right? I won't get into that. But I visited a middle-class home of a Chinese mother, and she had some incredibly expensive diapers at home. And I asked the frank question. I said, there are different price ranges that you have, and I see that you've got the most expensive diaper. And she said, my baby is the most important thing for me. And she actually took me inside her bedroom and a bathroom and showed. She says, I don't use makeup anymore. I will do everything I can to give my baby the best products. It doesn't matter what I do. I'm not going to use makeup. I'm not going to eat great food, but my baby must get the best. So on one hand, you have a mom like that. On the other hand, you might be in another country, say Vietnam, right? Just giving examples, don't take the country literally. But the mother may say, I want something which is good for my baby, but I also need something which is value for money, right? And so you're operating at both ends of the spectrum. And what started to happen for us was, we started to get insights in terms of the demanding mom, say the mom I talked about, and those insights led to materials, designs, engineering, innovations, which were incredible. And the confluence of all 3 things producing an outstanding and absolutely best-in-class diaper. On the other hand, we talked about, okay, we cannot compromise on certain things like absorbency, et cetera, but what can create value for the diaper? And that went into engineering again and the kind of assets. Then we went into, okay, so if we are producing this outstanding diaper with this cheap asset, can we produce a premium diaper on the same kind of asset with some modifications? And that led to a whole series of innovations which led to, therefore, productivity of a kind which was phenomenal, because now you're using an asset which you were producing a value diaper for to produce a premium diaper, and the consumer's getting the benefit because the value is huge that you're adding in terms of what's happening. Now, you think about the world, where else can this happen? Is this going to happen in the United States? It's not. It's going to happen in Asia, because it is not ever going to be one size fits all. And the diversity of Asia is what is leading to the innovation. And that is what is really, really exciting at this point in time. I won't talk digital and e-commerce right now because that's a big subject.
So let me put you on this. I mean, there's a stereotype out there that actually Asia is not good at innovation. And that innovation happens, let's say, in the United States. And it's the home to a lot of the great innovations in this world. You're challenging that. You're asserting at least there's a lot of innovation happening here.
I'm saying most of the innovation is happening here.
Most of the innovation.
Because it's changed. You're right. If you think about where the innovation was coming from, it was coming from the United States, a little bit from Europe. Today, 90% of the innovation is going from Asia. We've got an innovation center in Korea. It's clearly recognized, and in China, it's clearly recognized that these 2 countries are absolutely leading the charge on innovation, and including materials, engineering, design. Now, the good news is that you've got a lot from the US, which is an offer. Basic materials, we've got some fundamental research, etc., which is still really very relevant. Some engineering skills that we get in from the US are really very relevant. But the important thing is innovation is driven by a demanding consumer. The consumer in the US is trading down, right? While here, the consumer is trading up. and asking for more and more and more. And we talk about, the disparity in wealth. But what happens with the disparity in wealth is that the very rich are very, very demanding, right? And therefore, that leads to innovation. So if you think about innovation, the diversity, the disparity, the fact that people want to go up in life is what is driving innovation. So you think about the diversity of the consumer in Asia, and to my mind, that's why it's really pushing it hard.
Well, let's see how this, turning to my other side, diversity of the consumer trading up. How does that impact what you see in terms of the business here in Asia?
Well, I resonate a lot with the conversation. The consumer is demanding. Global multinationals were set up to leverage globalization, standardization, and now we're needing to customize. So how do we evolve the ability to customize in a global organization? It's a really big shift in the model, and it's being led by Asia. I mean, if I one of our brands is Johnny Walker. I'm not going to go too far on my commercial, but in Asia,
most of them are over 18.
Are they good? but in Asia, we started off by thinking if we bring Johnny Walker to China, and we bring Blue Label to China, and we put it on the shelf and we activate it the way we always activated, that will be enough. And we found, very, very average results. But when we married the 5 gods of wealth intimately engraved onto the bottle, something that really resonated with the consumer that we were trying to appeal to.
So you literally engraved?
We engrave it in a very sophisticated engraving technique. And you put the 5 gods of wealth on Johnny Walker Blue Label, and trust me, it brings luck, and wealth is important for Chinese, right? So it was an insight. We took our Blue Label, we developed the facility in China that enabled us to bespoke, if you like, change the offer, and suddenly we had something that was real. To the tourist, we then took that product from China and put it on the shelves of airports. And again, we really found that one simple insight, customized with a global offer, meant the difference between success and failure. So I think the ability for us through the infrastructure that we build into our markets, through the technical centers that we build in our markets, to bring customized products for the consumers we're trying to reach is absolutely critical. And it changes by country. So it's not just, that's an insight for China. Of course, it's different in the Philippines, it's different in Indonesia. So I think it's critical that we continue to, again, go back to those insights and adapt our model so that we're able to respond. And that means building infrastructure in markets, it means finishing center capability so we can still use the main production lines and finish those products as late as possible in the whole process. The other thing that we have done, and what is important to particularly luxury consumers, is the stories, the provenance, the heritage, the craftsmanship, so they can really get an appreciation of what's gone in to the product to justify the kind of value that we're asking. So we built a Scotland in China. They're called the Johnny Walker houses. We took the whole process of making scotch, of blending scotch. We gave them information about why Johnny Walker's so special. And that physical space then allowed us to start to access those high net worth individuals. Now in China, you can buy a barrel of Johnny Walker made specifically for your taste. We fly the master blender out to this beautiful facility. And again, the ability for us to be able to customize, to really understand the consumers, is the difference between success and failure.
Joking apart, I do remember Oreo's apocryphal story about changing the color for China. I don't know if this is true, but...
Let me give you the latest version of that. Honestly, Oreo is it's a 100-year-old brand, right? It's an American icon born in the US. And for 100 years, the innovation of Oreo came out of the United States. And for no matter where you went around the world, it's the world's #1 cookie. It was basically some derivation of that American biscuit. Just last year in August, back to your point, Kevin, about is Asia the hotbed of the new center of innovation? The answer is yes. And our latest example, just last August, our research and development team in China, Suzhou, China, created a new product called Oreo Thins. If you haven't seen it, I'll plug it. It's a great product. 40% thinner than the traditional Oreo. And indeed, coming out of the Chinese consumer taste, the Chinese consumer does not like a sweeter, bigger Oreo like the Americans do. That's, sad truth on American obesity. But instead, this lighter, thinner, delicate, more precise Oreo attracted this huge following in China. 1 year later, $70 million in sales in China. And now, for the first time in 100 years, an innovation out of Asia, Suzhou, China, has landed back in the United States. We launched it in the US 2 months ago. It's a flying success. It's the biggest success story in Oreo in years. And I think a great example of how the tables are turning, that an American icon brand like Oreo is actually seeing some of its most robust innovation right here in Asia.
Let me bring Chris in, because I'm also curious to explore the concept of the topic of digital. You all raised it, Jing, you started us off there. You're based in Singapore for the digital garage. Why Singapore? More generally, why Asia? What's happening on the digital scene from your point of view, and why is it out here and not back in the UK?
Thanks. And first of all, do you know how hard it is to go after Oreo and Johnny Walker? I sell insurance.
But you've got insurance.
Yeah, there you go.
What's more interesting than insurance?
Thanks for that. So you had to go digital. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Digital insurance is the ultimate combination, let me tell you.
Absolutely.
Good, right.
The reality is Aviva has a strategic principle, which is digital first, and it doesn't mean that we want every single consumer to buy insurance online, because that's a long time coming. What it does mean is recognizing that a lot of the consumers start their journey with us online. And a lot of empowered consumers want to understand, at least get some foundational knowledge before they choose who to partner with. And there's a lot of concerns here. I mean, if you look at Google now beginning to aggregate auto insurance in California, if you're an insurance provider and they show about 13 logos under the Google search line, and then there's a small font that says "and 5 more." So if you're one of those insurance companies that's "and 5 more," then you're kind of right down there. But the problem with that is insurance companies are allowing themselves to be commoditized as a monoline. And our margin is being taken by those that control the data. So Google has 4 million searches a minute, I think, roughly. And we can't compete with that. So what Aviva is trying to do is, first of all, again, as I mentioned, separate the capability away from the traditional businesses. 2 is hire the right talent. 3 is give them a good environment to do quick test and learn and not be worried to fail. And we've just called those garages. I'll come to answer your question in a minute. 4th is to give them a budget and not have them worry too much about bureaucracy and process of approving those budgets. Last but not least, of course, is setting the right targets. And this is really key. If you set a revenue target right off the bat, then it's going to fail right off the bat. So all we care about at the moment, if I use our UK business as an example, we have 17 million customers to target. Only about 10% of them are registered on our portal. So our first and immediate opportunity is to multiply that 1.7 million 5 to 6 times. Then you can offer them customized things. And at that point in time, if we can eliminate all electronic forms, we give our customers an opportunity to benefit from customized offers and a one-click to bind, or literally, if you buy stuff from iTunes, you can fingerprint and you're through. So it's that kind of ease of transaction that we think might give us a shot at winning the game. And if we can integrate solutions as opposed to play as a monoline commodity, that's our fundamental strategy. Now, answering Kevin's question directly, Singapore, we kind of mentioned it earlier or heard it from last session. Singapore does so well because it knows its fundamental value creation for this country is services. And it sees the next big wave as digital and startups and innovation. So they are investing significantly in this area. And we see it as just a great hub to hire talent. Our regional office is here, so there's a natural kind of synergy. But it is actually an extension of our global capability. So Singapore's garage is not just for Singapore. It's not just for the region either. Frankly, the talent here is going to service all of our businesses around the world. We're going to try and build ones for global deployment. And last but not least, some of the most amazing innovation is actually happening in China, especially in the fintech world. So that is, of course, an area that we can't forget. And our own team in China, and maybe there's a little bit of a link here with you guys, but our partner in China is COFCO. And they're doing some really interesting things with social media, with facilities like WeChat, and doing campaigns that we would have never thought to do, frankly, in other parts of the world.
Jing, you opened by talking about digital and mentioned that as one of the things you see, obviously, when you're talking to companies in the region. Again, could you just share a few thoughts on where you think digital in Asia ranks relative to, let's say, outside Asia compared to the US, for example?
Well, as I speak with executives across different industries and across different geographical regions, Kevin, clearly Asia is on the cutting edge of the digital transformation, not just for goods purchases. We haven't yet talked about experiences. The Asian consumer is getting wealthier by the day. They have perhaps purchased enough worldly goods for their homes. They've got the TVs, they've got the various electronics. Now they're seeking experiences. The experiences are important. For example, everyone likes to have fun. Games are huge in Asia. Movie theaters, travel, so restaurants, of course. So I just want to give you an example, Kevin. It's interesting. We talked about digital. The digital transformation is not just an all positive. In fact, it's hurt some traditional businesses. For example, brick and mortar shops. Just using China as an example where this phenomenon is most apparent. We have some ghost malls now, because consumers are increasingly going online. They're doing e-commerce. These shopping malls and department stores have become showrooms. So these days, I talk to quite a lot of real estate developers. They're actually transforming how they build a shopping mall. In the past, food and beverage and restaurants and entertainment would account for about 20-25% of the entire space, right? If they're building a mixed-use property. These days, they're adding more experiences. They're adding more movie theaters. They're adding more restaurants, which serve Johnny Walker, of course. And they're adding more places where people can relax and have fun, rather than just having one shop after another, one shop after another. So I think the digital transformation is not just a transformation for each brand, but it's also a transformation for real estate developers, shopping mall developers. They need to inject more experiences into their designs. And then speaking of experiences, the Chinese consumer and the Asian consumer are increasingly traveling overseas to seek out new experiences. So hotels, for example, are going to be high in demand. So where do they stay when they go to Paris, when they go to Milan? You see the Chinese conglomerate Fosun recently purchasing Club Med at a very high price because they're counting on more Chinese travelers going overseas to enjoy five-star experiences at Club Med. So let's not forget the experience part of the consumer. This is part of the growing up experience for consumers. In the West, of course, people have already traveled a lot. But here in Asia, how many people have never gotten on the plane? How many people have never even traveled outside of their immediate hometown? So then this has an immediate impact on infrastructure. Governments across Asia need to build better infrastructure. Real estate developers need to build better shopping malls that are catering to the new generation of consumers. And brands need to move quickly ahead of consumer demand rather than reacting to consumer demand.
So we've only got a few minutes left, just to give each panelist a chance to perhaps provide an answer to the question that many people in this part of the world keep asking. Is this going to be the Asian century? If the last century was the century of the West, and perhaps of the US in particular, is this going to be the Asian century? Acho.
I think Asia is going to lead a lot of the trends here, and we're talking right now about digital and e-commerce. E-commerce is something which is just going to break the traditional models. In the past, companies like ours could put up barriers to entry because it's very difficult for anyone coming from outside to immediately go and list their products in stores, etc. E-commerce, you've got a digital shelf. Immediately you get listing. Every consumer in the country can access. All those traditional barriers are breaking down, and therefore it's something which Asia is absolutely getting impacted by. Just as a point which I would make is that we got about a $3 billion business in Asia, $500 million already online. 2012, we had hardly anything online. Look at the speed at which this is moving. You talk about digital, and in terms of communicating with the consumer, you've got things like trading desks going on. With programmatic buying, you can actually target specific consumers, putting in KPIs that you want to achieve. it's completely transforming the world, and it's going to be the millennials of Asia who are leading the charge. And that is going to impact the rest of the world. So I absolutely believe, I don't know whether it's in the Asian century, but I certainly think that it's going to be, a lot of lead is going to come from Asia in the future.
Sam?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I think for all the reasons, absolutely. I mean, if we look at the India-China dynamic, if we look at the population in Southeast Asia, if you look at GDP, urbanization, when is a question, and it all depends on the ability for those governments to make the right reforms and to put the right governance in place. But there is no doubt in my mind that Asia will be leading the growth charge for the next century.
Chris?
Yeah, I think it'll be a rough ride, though. I think there's a lot a lot going on in the world. There's a lot of dynamics in the world, and honestly, I don't have the first clue as to how it's all going to play out. But I do think that the big macro trends that I mentioned earlier, whether it is the aging populations, the emerging middle class, the urbanization, all those are very, very powerful dynamics that will continue to be around for, I think, 2 or 3 decades. So is there opportunity? Absolutely. Will everybody succeed? No. I think companies have to know what they stand for, what they're really, really good at, and how they're going to offer a truly value-added proposition to our customers.
Jing?
Well, Kevin, if you look around the world, developed markets are growing 1.7% this year. Non-Asian emerging markets growing barely 0.3% this year, dragged down by currency collapses in countries like Brazil and Russia. Here in Asia, growth rates are still relatively high compared to various other parts of the world. So in terms of contribution of Asia made to global growth, this region is the highest, over 50%. China itself is contributing over 30% to global growth. So on that front, yes, indeed, China and Asia are making a very important contribution to global growth. So this could be actually the Asian century if governments and businesses can execute their strategies well.
And Tim?
Kevin, I know we're out of time. I'll keep it short and be bold and say yes.
Well, there we are. You heard it here. So I think all that remains for me to do, I think we've managed to cover Blue Label whiskey with the gods of wealth, the best diapers in the world, Oreo thins, and the promise of insurance in Asia. So that's not a bad panel. Thank you very much. And the answer is yes.